guys, Spud here, as always. And alright guys, we are once again taking a break from DCS World to fly in real life and take a look at my very first competition in my Yakovlev Yak-55M Mischief. And if you caught the spoiler in the last video, things didn't go exactly to plan in this competition. Actually, it was rather a disaster. So let's jump in and take a look. Before we get started here guys, I highly recommend you go back and take a look at my video on preparing and practicing for the competition linked here on screen and pinned in the comments down below to get some background knowledge on the routine and the maneuvers I'll be flying in the video. And while things maybe didn't go as smoothly as I was hoping, it sure was a ton of fun and a great experience that I will not forget anytime soon. Not to mention, we had a couple of DCS World community members come out and view the competition, and a huge shout out to SD Blackstaff, who got out there to help push airplanes around and even got to watch me eat shit falling off the wing of an airplane. So let's jump right on into the competition. Okay guys, picking up right where we left off in the last video. At this point, I'm feeling very comfortable flying acro in the Yak-55M and flying the Sportsman Known routine, and each individual maneuver in said routine. But, like anything else in life, and especially in the unforgiving world of aviation, you can always use more practice. Which, as we established in the last video, is the most fun part of flying competition aerobatics anyway. So thanks to IAC 36's Acrofest being held at Borrego Valley Airport, just on the other side of the Cuyamaca Mountains from San Diego, we have home field advantage, and my teammates and I, along with our coach, all packed up and headed on out there to the desert a few days early. In these last few practice flights before the competition, we know the figures of the sequence, and we are really just trying to tighten everything up from our positioning in the box, the timing between figures, and the altitude at which I'll finish the sequence at the bottom of the box to really squeeze every last point possible out of the flights in front of the judges. Altitude control has really been one of the biggest issues I have encountered while preparing for the competition. And that really isn't helped by the slight delay in the pitot-static system of the Yak-55. But over time, with practice and feedback from my coach, at this point I'm starting to realize that my issues with finishing the sequence too low are really more in my head than in reality. My use of timing between maneuvers and feeling out the G-loading required to fly each maneuver perfectly, or at least as close to perfectly as I can get it, has made up for the lagging altimeter and the big fat yak wing blocking my view downwards of the box below me. Plus, my coach swears I'm not finishing too low in the box. You'll notice on the G meter in my cockpit at the top left of the instrument panel here, as I fly through the sequence, I really don't get much over 5.5 to 6 Gs. Maybe up to 6.5 if I really mess a maneuver up. And while I can definitely get my Yak-55M all the way up to 9 Gs no problem, to fly in the most efficient and clean manner possible, and to retain enough energy to complete the sequence, I have to be very careful not to pull too many Gs and accelerate stall the wing during a maneuver. But you can definitely see that in the Split S, This is where I really yank on the stick and crank up the G's in order to avoid too much altitude loss. Plus, a split S that close to the desert floor is just a little bit nerve-wracking. So, now that we have my confidence up, and I'm feeling as ready as I can be, it's time to head to the actual competition itself. International Aerobatics Club, or IAC competitions, such as Acrofest 2024 here, are usually held over a total of 3 days. The first day is the registration and practice day, the day where most of the competitors filter in from wherever they're flying in from and will register with the competition registrar. Then, once this is complete, the competitor will need to pass a tech or technical inspection, performed by a combination of an IAC competition official to check the pilot's documents such as their pilot's license, medical certificate, aircraft insurance, competition documents, and of course the most important thing, their lunch order. Then, the pilot will have their aircraft and all aircraft documents, such as the airworthiness certificates and registration, inspected by an A&P, even if the aircraft is in an experimental category aircraft such as my Yak-55. Once you pass your tech inspection, you're able to then run to the roster to get your name on the sign-up sheet for the box for approximately a 15-minute time slot to get up into the air and just barely squeeze in one more practice run before the real competition starts. Because there are more and more aircraft starting to show up for the competition, and there is a need to get everyone up in the air at least once for a practice flight, not to mention the fact that the airport itself is never NOTAM closed to GA traffic, there is a need for tighter and tighter control as the day goes on. This usually comes in the form of volunteers manning the radios at this usually uncontrolled airport to warn GA traffic of the intense aerobatic activity occurring just north of the airfield, and to clear competition pilots for their practice runs in the box. And eventually, a dead prop area will be established where aircraft are no longer permitted to taxi under their own power on the ramp due to the reduced visibility of tail dragger aircraft and Borrego Valley Airport quickly being turned into an aircraft carrier-like maze of aerobatic aircraft all stacked right on top of each other. At this point, and through the rest of the aerobatic competition, aircraft will need to be pushed and pulled manually to the fuel pumps and parking areas as a pretty important safety measure for the safety of all of the pilots, spectators, judges, and volunteers. Now, speaking of volunteers, all IAC competitions are put together and run through volunteers. The IAC itself only has about 3 to 4 full-time employees. Volunteers organize the entire competition, push airplanes around, judge the competition, assist the judges, record scores, pump gas, put together the awards, order lunches, and many other tasks to help these competitions run as smoothly as possible. Thankfully, for my 15-minute practice slot, my coach was still around and able to help me make some last fine-tuning adjustments to my maneuvers, box positioning, and presentation for the judges. But these were all tiny adjustments because you don't want to make huge changes right before a competition, just like in any other sport where you don't want to start second-guessing yourself and how you fly the whole sequence in the middle of a competition. I think the biggest confidence booster for me personally was really seeing that I had my altitude at the bottom of the box under control after I watched numerous other pilots fly their practice routines and end up lower than I and other Yak-55 pilots were ending the sequence at. Not to mention the fact that I talked to another Yak-55 owner who flew all the way to Borrego Valley Airport from the San Francisco Bay Area, and he had the exact same pitot-static delay issue which was making me start to think that this was just an issue endemic to the Yak-55 design as a whole. And as usual, practice day is always the most fun day of a competition in my opinion, because you get to fly in the box and see old friends you haven't seen in a while and meet lots of new folks. And it's really just an awesome hangout at the airport day. Flying in an IAC competition is an all-day affair, and at a large competition like Acrofest, it will truly be a day of hard work from sunrise to sunset. And as a competitor, you're going to be flying for maybe a total of 10 minutes that entire time. The day starts off with a safety briefing and a mass brief from the competition officials and head judge, laying out how the competition will be run, the dead prop safety areas, the holding areas, and the procedures for being cleared into the box for your sequence in front of the judges. Each pilot will get 3 flights in front of the judges, and each figure in the sequence will get a score out of 10, with a presentation score of 10 added on top. And the scores from all 5 judges will be aggregated together for an overall score for that flight. The mass briefing is also where all of the pilots are assigned our volunteer jobs for the contest. Being one of the few people that could somewhat kinda sorta mostly read arrestee sequences, I was assigned to be an assistant judge, where I would read out the figures and the maneuvers of competitors' sequences to the judge, so they knew exactly what to look for while grading the pilot currently flying in the box. When it came to the flying part of the day, I was assigned to be the very first pilot in the box of the day, and the very last flight of the day. And man, was I excited to get up there to the starting line in my new, beautiful, red and white Yak-55M, ready to rock and roll. Part of me thinks the Acrofest organizers wanted my airplane to fly first because it was on the competition logo. I took off and felt absolutely awesome. It was so much fun flying in the box in a competition again. I was trembling from the excitement and the adrenaline, and probably overdid it a little in the routine because of this. But I ended up with a score in the low 70s. Not bad, but also not great. Most of the competitors would say that judges are judging the most harshly on the very first and the very last aircraft of the day. Oh man, guys, day 1 of the competition was truly sunrise to sunset, and day 2 was shaping up to somehow be even longer. On the first day, due to some delays, not every pilot got to fly twice as scheduled, and that included me as well, as I was scheduled to be the very last pilot of the first day. And just like the previous day, I was set to fly right near the beginning of the flying lineup, and in the rush to get ready for the first flight, that's when the first disaster of the day struck. As I was pulling my helmet out of my helmet bag, the boom mic got stuck on the zipper and completely ripped the guts out of the microphone, leaving my helmet completely unusable. Because of course, you can't fly in an aerobatics competition while Nordo. But thankfully, one of my teammates graciously lent me his helmet to use for the day's competition flights. And while it wasn't very comfortable because it wasn't fitted correctly to my noggin, at least I could talk on the radio and get to flying. But of course, the day would only get worse from there. At the starting line for my first flight of the day, I was already overamped due to scrambling around to get a new helmet, and I just couldn't get my engine started. I pressed and pressed on the start button and got nothing. I went through my whole air bottle and needed to refill from our scuba tank. And on the second full air bottle, I finally got her started up. But man, talk about embarrassing. Taxiing to the runway, I had to really calm myself down from being rather embarrassed and get my head right to get up into the air and not only fly safely, but also fly my sequence well and hopefully score some points. And even through the embarrassment and uncomfortable helmet, I ended up flying even better than my first flight on the previous day, scoring in the mid-70s this time, a few points ahead of where I started. And that's what it's all about, just getting better and competing against yourself. But unfortunately, the day was gonna get even worse and even more embarrassing. After rotating through working as a judge's assistant again, reading out those arrestee diagrams, it was time for the last flight of the competition. And wouldn't you know it, I would be the very last pilot to fly in the competition. Now, by this point, I had already established in front of everybody that I was having a bit of a hard time hot starting the engine. After some practice playing around with my airplane after the competition back at my hangar, I really found that I wasn't pressing the start button hard enough while strapped tightly into the hooker harness, and I wasn't getting the full pressure from the air bottle to turn over the engine on startup. It also didn't help that I was over-priming the engine for a hot start as well. And I guess you live and you learn. And of course, after another failure to start in front of the entire airport full of people, the big radial engine of my Yak-55M had made the surfaces of the airplane slick from all of the thrown engine oil. And after we got her air bottle filled up for another attempt, I started to climb my way back up into the cockpit, and of course, I slipped off of the strut and promptly split my knee wide open against the landing gear. And after a quick checkout from friends, I climbed back up into the cockpit to go for the flight, bleeding down my leg with a badly fitting helmet and my pride definitely bruised. But somehow, some way, I willed the airplane to start. I made sure to really mash on that button and give her a lot less prime. I felt like Clark Griswold trying to finally get his house to light up in Christmas Vacation. And she finally fired up, and I let out probably the largest sigh of relief I've ever let out in my entire life. And I taxied out, and as I pushed the throttle up for takeoff, all of the pain in my leg and in my noggin from the helmet melted away, and I flew out into my element, my personal paradise. This could be I ended up flying one of the best competition aerobatic flights I've ever flown. My score much higher than my previous two and cementing my place solidly in the midfield. And 8th place out of 16 pilots in the sportsman category for Acrofest 2024. But man, this was a crazy competition, and one I definitely won't forget. The first competition with my Yak-55, splitting my knee open, wearing a totally uncomfortable helmet, and having trouble with the engine. As one of my teammates said to me, something always goes wrong at a competition, and I guess it was my turn to go wrong. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give us a like and a subscribe, and we will see ya in the next one. Fly safe out there, guys, and always fly upside down.